morning, metalheads of the internet. Welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown, and in honor of their 50th anniversary, today we are going to review every single Black Sabbath album ever made. Y'all might want to get yourself some snacks and a drink real quick, because this is going to be a long one. A very long one. First, a few ground rules. We are specifically looking at original studio albums from Black Sabbath. We're not wasting our time with live albums and compilations and box sets, and we're especially not wasting our time with the Ozzy and Dio solo records. If it doesn't have the name Black Sabbath on it, and it doesn't have original material, I'm not interested right now. Second, because we are reviewing close to 20 albums, each of these reviews will be relatively short. The detail, the analysis that you might normally expect from a Metal Meltdown video will still be here. It'll just be in really fucking small chunks. This video will flow more like an Albums I Missed video rather than a traditional Metal Meltdown review. Plus, let's be honest, most of y'all are familiar with at least a third of Black Sabbath's entire discography, so it's not like we really have to go into a lot of detail to begin with. Thirdly, this is not a worst to best video. This is not a ranked list. This is every single album being reviewed in order of release. Why? Because doing that other shit is difficult. That's why. And I'm a lazy motherfucker, and I'd like to not be here for 3 fucking hours if that's possible. That should cover it for now. I can't really think of any rules or parameters that I may have missed, so let's get right into it. Let's start with the band's debut self-titled album, Black Sabbath, released in February 1970. This album is over 50 years old, and it is still a certified banger. In part because of the incredible atmosphere consistently oozing, bleeding out of this record's pores. It is dark, it is ominous, it is mysterious, it is genuinely quite evil. The album's title track in particular is a genuinely horrifying moment, not just by the standards of 1970, but even by the standards of 2020. From the audio samples of church bells and rainfall, to Ozzy's howled vocals, to the band's outright genius use of the devil's chord within the main riff. I will admit that the album does noticeably get a lot more upbeat after this particular track, but don't mistake that for some sort of compromise, as evil still flows through the veins of tracks like Behind the Wall of Sleep, Sleeping Village, Warning, and especially the hefty blues rocker The Wizard. I would argue one of Black Sabbath's finest fucking songs, with its delicious twin harmonica and guitar melodies and its powerful aching vocals from Ozzy. And I gotta say, while it isn't 100% relevant to the final quality of the album, it is extremely impressive that Black Sabbath managed to record this in an entire fucking day. It's just a testament to how well organized and how talented these guys really were, even in their youth. I don't really have much else to say. This would be a 4 out of 5 for me. Just a fucking banger. 50 years later, still a fucking banger. Incredible. Next up, Paranoid, released only a few months later in September 1970. And holy crap, it's honestly hard to believe this is the same band that made Black Sabbath, because what a massive and incredible leap forward in such a small amount of time. Paranoid is bigger, it is bolder, it is more ambitious, the musicianship is wilder, the band is bringing in more influences from jazz and blues and psychedelic rock, the riffs are getting heavier, Ozzy's vocals are getting a lot more confident, the lyrics are getting a lot more poetic, a lot more timely, a lot more poignant. The sonic atmosphere remains every bit as evil and mysterious and tortured as before, perhaps even more so, now that the band is pulling even more influences from real-life horror and war. And all of this combined makes not only for one of Black Sabbath's best albums, not only one of the best metal albums ever created, but quite possibly one of the best albums in any genre period. When people ask me what a 5 out of 5 experience is, Paranoid is one of the first albums I think of. Plain and simple. Tracks like Planet Caravan and Electric Funeral are still so mysterious and gloomy and weird 50 years down the line. Iron Man is still an ominous, cautionary tale of revolution and technology and futurism, with one of the most iconic riffs in heavy metal history and one of the best endings to any song, period. Paranoid remains a very fun, accessible, hard rock jam with some great riffs, some great guitar solos, and some severely underappreciated lyrics about paranoia and mental health. And oh my god, War Pigs. I could literally dedicate an entire episode, an entire video on the Metal Meltdown to the overwhelming brilliance that is War Pigs. I think you all know where I'm headed with this, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it. 5 out of 5. This is a fucking perfect record. If for whatever reason you could only ever listen to one Black Sabbath album for the rest of your life, I would make sure that it's Paranoid. Next up, Master of Reality, released in July 1971, and big shocker here, another fucking banger. This album's very interesting because it probably has one of Black Sabbath's most unique sonic identities. For one, the percussion and bass work is a lot heavier, perhaps ranking as some of the heaviest in Black Sabbath's entire discography. The tempos on this album are a lot slower, a lot more meticulous, and require a little bit more patience than songs like, say, Paranoid or The Wizard. And they are devastatingly heavy, apocalyptically heavy, from the slow, drawling, almost depressive paces of After Forever and Into the Void and Lord of This World, to Ozzy's lyrics about time and space and the apocalypse. Even a song that is ultimately just about smoke and pot, Sweet Leaf, is still devastatingly, heart-wrenchingly heavy. Although that being said, my personal pick for heaviest number on this record is Children of the Grave. Holy fucking shit. One of the most anthemic, triumphant, and powerful tracks, not only in Black Sabbath's discography, but in the history of heavy metal. Me personally, I'd go for a 4.5 out of 5, but I would not argue with anyone who decided to give this a 5 out of 5 score. I would not argue with anyone who argued that this was a perfect record, because goddamn is it fucking close, and goddamn does it deserve that title. Next up, Volume 4, released in September 1972. Now, at this point in Black Sabbath's career, it's worth noting that Black Sabbath are doing a lot of drugs and drinking a lot of beer and getting in a lot of trouble. I mean, they pretty much consistently are doing that in these early years, but this album especially sees Black Sabbath at a very chaotic point. And that chaos is successfully translated into Volume 4. In many ways, it is, from a songwriting perspective, one of the most ambitious records. We're seeing a lot of subtle progressive rock influence across the record, particularly in some of Tony Iommi's guitar work. The melodies are getting a little bit more vibrant as well, almost as if we're beginning to pull influence from some American rock of the time. The band even dish out their first ever ballad in the form of the track Changes. And while I honestly can't say that I enjoy this as much as Paranoid and Masters of Reality, there's no arguing that there is definitely some very interesting and exciting material here. From Cornucopia to Under the Sun to Snowblind to Supernaut. Truthfully, I've never been a huge fan of the track Changes. I've always found it to be a very run-of-the-mill, cookie-cutter kind of rock-pop ballad. But it is still nice to see Black Sabbath showing a little bit more vulnerability and emotional honesty on this number, with a particularly powerful performance from Ozzy, I would say. Personally, I'd give this a 3.5 out of 5. The progressive, experimental, emotional chaos of the music is really exciting, and it's nice to see that Black Sabbath, by this point in their career, aren't interested in repeating themselves. I mean, they are still identifiably Black Sabbath, but they're not satisfied simply playing The Wizard over and over again. Next up, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, released in December 1973. That's weird, it took over a year for this album to come out. Why is that? Well, it's simple, because behind the scenes they were all starting to go fucking insane. While the chaos surrounding the development of Volume 4 did make it a much more exciting and immersive album in return, unfortunately I think the chaos surrounding Sabbath Bloody Sabbath has weighed it down a little bit. The production is worse, the songwriting isn't nearly as consistent, and Black Sabbath is straying into some genuinely questionable territory. Now, there are still some bangers on here. The title track in particular is pretty fucking awesome, but I can't really say I'm feeling the straight up swing and boogie rock of something like Sabracadabra. I can't really say that the more plain minimalistic hard rock of National Acrobat is doing a lot for me. And I'm especially not feeling the instrumental piece Fluff, which I just hate it, honestly. I really do. This song sounds like a bunch of sheep taking a nap in a field. This song sounds like a cloud tucking you into bed at night. This song sounds like, well, fluff, and I fucking hate it. Some of y'all are probably gonna hate me for this, but honestly, I would personally give this album a 2 out of 5. I just do not think it is a very well produced, arranged, or presented album. 2 great songs cannot save a bad album. It really is that simple for me. Next up, Sabotage, released in July 1975, and I honestly don't have a lot to say about this album either. By this point in the band's career, there is so much personal and legal chaos behind the scenes that it's really bringing down the band's creativity and enthusiasm. As a result, Sabotage feels very stale. A lot of the songs and riffs and lyrics feel recycled. Honestly, off the top of my head, the only number I remember from this track at all is Symptom of the Universe, which, let's all be entirely honest with ourselves, is probably one of the most generic cuts that Black Sabbath ever fucking put out. I do think that the production value is a lot better than Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, but ultimately I would also give this album a 2 out of 5. It's just not really doing fucking anything for me. Next up, Technical Ecstasy, released in September 1976, and this is the point where even the Black Sabbath fans aren't really feeling Black Sabbath. They were able to vibe with the more experimental and progressive turns of Master of Reality Volume 4 and even Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, but suddenly the more basic American hard rock influenced sound of Technical Ecstasy is a bit too much for them. And honestly, I can't really blame them, especially when their take on hard rock is so uninspired, so derivative of bands like Queen and Judas Priest and Thin Lizzy. I can briefly get down with Dirty Women and Rock and Roll Doctor, and it's alright as a pretty enjoyable ballad with a pretty impressive vocal performance from Bill Ward as well. But yeah, this is really lame, really forgettable. Like, it really does feel as if the creative spark has been sapped out of Black Sabbath at this point, so I'm gonna go with yet another 2 out of 5. Real fucking shame here. Next up, Never Say Die, released in September 1978. Everything got so chaotic behind the scenes that Black Sabbath were never able to really get their shit together, to the point where Ozzy ended up leaving the band for a brief period before being brought back in to finish work on this album. By this point, it's clear to me that Black Sabbath have lost their creative edge, and while Never Say Die is admittedly a lot more enthusiastic than Sabotage and Technical Ecstasy, the songwriting still just isn't there. In fact, excluding the album's title track, I don't really remember a single moment of music on this album whatsoever. Like, I literally just listened to this album before I started recording this video, and I'm struggling to remember fucking anything aside from the title track. It is really saved only by its enthusiasm and production value. That is about fucking it. Genuinely disappointing. I mean, as much as I love Ozzy Osbourne, as important as he is to the evolution of heavy metal, it's clear to me at this point that Black Sabbath needed to make a change, and they needed to make one fast. Here's a twist. They agreed with that. They looked into the future and they said, "We got you, Metal Meltdown. We know what you want. And we're going to give you exactly what you want, with the help of Rainbow lead singer Ronnie James Dio joining the band for Heaven and Hell, released April 1980. With all due respect again to Ozzy, Dio brings a level of elegance, discipline, and danger to Black Sabbath that Ozzy could never have done even at his best. Fusing the band's attempts at traditional hard rock and heavy metal songwriting with some of the progressive flavors of Volume 4, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and some of the epic soundscapes of Dio's previous band, Rainbow, Black Sabbath concoct one of the best heavy metal albums of all time, yet again. That's right, boys, certified banger time. Here we fucking go. Neon Knights, banger. Die Young, banger. Lady Evil, banger. A fucking sexy one at that, may I add. And the title track, Heaven and Hell, holy shit. Holy shit. It moves me. It moves me to this day. I love it. You love it. We all love it. Who the fuck doesn't love this? 5 out of 5. Straight up. 5 out of 5. Like, it's fucking incredible. It's fucking perfect. What more do you need to know? It's fucking Dio singing for Black Sabbath. What more do you need to know than that? Tell me. I'd like to know. Trick question. You can't, because you don't need more than that. It's perfect. Plain and simple. Few bands are capable of moving on with a new lead singer, but god damn it, Black Sabbath pulled it off. Briefly. Yeah, unfortunately the following album, Mod Rules, released in November 1981, just isn't quite as triumphant or as cathartic as Heaven and Hell, which isn't to say that it doesn't have some bangers in its own right. The title track in particular is kind of a nasty, fun track, arguably kind of iconic. You know, lots of Dio and Sabbath fans like this track still to this day. But I wouldn't say that it's especially memorable. And perhaps that has more to do with the incredible impact of Heaven and Hell. You know, like maybe Mob Rules just didn't stand a chance regardless, you know? Like it just automatically dwarfs in comparison to the magnitude of Heaven and Hell, you know what I mean? I don't know. Whatever the case may be, this just is not as big of a hit as Heaven and Hell, and clearly Black Sabbath realized that to some extent as well, because after this they gave Dio the axe. Another shame, but honestly it's not a waste of time. Again, there are some bangers on here, some pretty good riffs on here. Dio, of course, you know, is Dio. He automatically makes a bad album really fucking good. So I'd actually give this a 3 out of 5. Maybe not the most enthusiastic 3 out of 5, but a 3 out of 5 nonetheless. Okay, so we just reviewed like 10 fucking albums, and these 10 albums are easily Black Sabbath's most recognizable and most interesting. The rest is a lot more hit and miss, and in some cases, a lot more painful. Let's just get this over with. Born Again, released in August 1973, the band's only album with Deep Purple singer Ian Gillan. It's fucking garbage. But, in Black Sabbath's defense, I'm not going to place the blame entirely on them. I'm actually going to place some blame on Vertigo Records and the band's manager Don Arden, who insisted that this new collaboration between Ian Gillan, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward would be labeled as a Black Sabbath record. They were under the assumption that they were just going to like get together, have a couple of drinks, and try to create something more in line with the rock and metal of that time. What they ended up creating was something that not only should not have been born again, but it shouldn't have been born, period. I also frankly place some of the blame on the band's actual mental and physical well-being of the time. They were not in a very healthy place right here. Much of this project was conceived by Tony Iommi and Ian Gillan, literally broing the fuck out and drinking ungodly amounts of booze, and as such, unfortunately, it drove the newly returned Bill Ward back into drinking, who had actually just been sober for a few years. This infighting, this micromanaging, this newfound battle with alcoholism unfortunately impacts Born Again directly. It makes it very awkward, it makes it very strange and not in a good way, it makes it very uncomfortable. Songs like Zero the Hero, Disturbing the Priest, and the utterly fucking catastrophic title track are unbearable to listen to the point of being almost cringeworthy. And speaking of cringe, I'm not really sure how I feel about the track Digital Bitch. It's just kinda kind of weird. I feel like it's Ian Gillan trying to like talk smack about the women of the 80s or something. I'm not really sure what he's getting at, but I do know that it falls flat on its fucking ass. That much is certain. And from a production standpoint, this is just an ugly album to listen to. It's very raw, the guitars are very grainy, mixed very low in the mix as well, and Ian Gillan's vocals are so inherently fucking electric and bombastic that it's kind of irritating. They dig into your skull like they're fucking earworms. Like, dude, you're not Dio. Chill the fuck out. This is like a 0.5 out of 5 for me, honestly. This is just embarrassingly, insultingly terrible, to the point where, honestly, I feel like this is the Saint Anger of Black Sabbath's career. Like, this is a creative low, this is a personal low for them, it's just bad for everyone, and it sucks, and I hate it. And I hate this album. I'm honestly having trouble describing how much I fucking hate this album. It's just so fucking bad. It's so weird, so awkward, so uncomfortable, easily the worst album in their discography, and I hope that I forget about it the moment this video is uploaded online. Next up, Seventh Star, released in January 1986. Now, it's worth noting that much like Born Again, this was never supposed to be a Black Sabbath album. This was in fact supposed to be an actual solo album from Tony Iommi, featuring Glenn Hughes on lead vocals. Unfortunately, once again, due to the pressures of Don Arden and the record label, this was repackaged as a Black Sabbath album featuring Tony Iommi, rather than a full-blown Tony Iommi solo album. It's unfortunate the way this turned out again, but to be fair, this is definitely a lot better than Born Again. It is better produced, it is better performed, it's got some fantastic vocals from the severely underrated Glenn Hughes, who has never been able to leave much of a stamp as a singer in the world of rock, which is an absolute fucking shame because the dude is mega talented. It has a more traditional heavy metal sound that almost seems inspired by some new album stuff of the time, almost reminding me of like early Whitesnake, a little bit of early Def Leppard, maybe even just a little bit of the guitar melodies and the antics of Iron Maiden. By no means a revolutionary record, but honestly an entertaining one at least. I would feel comfortable giving this a genuinely enthusiastic 3 out of 5. Okay, I actually feel comfortable with that. Yeah, 3 out of 5, let's go with that. I guess from here on, Tony decided that he's never going to escape Black Sabbath even if he tries, so at this point he officially brings Black Sabbath back with a brand new lineup on the Eternal album released in November 1987. This would end up being the band's first album with singer Tony Martin, who strangely is one of Black Sabbath's longest-standing vocalists despite not being a particularly well-known or accomplished singer. That's pretty fucking impressive in and of itself. Let's all be entirely honest here. And speaking of being entirely honest, the Internal Idol is really not that bad either. Black Sabbath is definitely leaning very heavy into the 80s metal influence at this time. I'm even reminded of a lot of Queensryche throughout this record, but it works pretty well with Tony Martin, who, to his credit, does try to bring in some more epic, almost traditional doom metal vocal flavors into the sound, with a lot of very electric and triumphant melodies and choruses. Take, for instance, the track Nightmare, which honestly probably could have fit on a Dio-era Sabbath album. Or tracks like The Shining and Glory Ride, which are just bleeding with pure 80s synth metal goodness. Yeah, I like this album. I'd actually give it a 3.5 out of 5, to be entirely honest with you. It's pretty damn good. Next up is Headless Cross, released in April 1989, and I pretty much feel the same way about this album that I do about Eternal Idol. The big difference this time around is that Tony Iommi, pretty much for the first time since Mob Rules, sounds and feels really confident as a songwriter and guitarist, arguably his most confident since the glory days of Sabbath and their most experimental works. As such, the songwriting is bolder across the record, the production is a lot better across the record, the choruses are bigger, the musicianship is a lot more dynamic and objectively metal. The title track, Headless Cross, is a great song, Call the Wild is a great song, Nightwing, Devil and Daughter, they're all legitimately really catchy and heavy with a lot of great performances. It is by this point that I am truthfully missing the more traditional blues and jazz darkness of classic Black Sabbath, but I won't argue that this isn't a damn fine record. It's really well made, honestly. Perhaps Black Sabbath's best album of this particular period. With that in mind, I'd actually feel comfortable giving this a 4 out of 5. This is a really great album, and perhaps one of Black Sabbath's most underrated albums from this era. Like, honestly, I think it says a lot about the quality of this album when I tell you that there are albums that Dio and Ozzy made at this exact time that I would turn down in favor of Headless Cross. Like, it's a good fucking album, man. Next up, Tear, released in August 1990, which, in my opinion, is a little bit of a dip from Eternal Idol and Headless Cross. It's not quite as consistently entertaining and invigorating, but it is very interesting for a number of reasons. For one, the material itself isn't nearly as dark. Even the riffs seem to stray from the usual darkness even expected of Black Sabbath at the time. The lyrics and song titles take a lot of inspiration from Norse mythology, to the point where many fans actually thought that this was a concept album. It's a lot more ethereal, a lot more atmospheric. There are a lot more dramatic choirs and synthesizers and guitar solos. On some level, I'm weirdly reminded of Sabotage and even some very early Skyclad. I can't say that I'm 100% into it, but it is definitely interesting. It definitely holds your attention, and if you are looking for the bombastic nature of Skyclad and Sabotage, and you don't mind it being applied to Black Sabbath, then this is kind of entertaining. I would probably give this a 3 out of 5. Maybe not the most enthusiastic, especially since it's not quite as consistently entertaining as the previous two records, but definitely noteworthy, shall we say. This is neat. It's different. Next up is Dehumanizer, released in June 1992, and this is an especially interesting moment for the band as it sees Tony Iommi reuniting with Ronnie James Dio, Geezer Butler, and Vinny Appice, ditching the Norse mythology, ditching the 80s metal soundscapes in flavor of a more traditional Black Sabbath darkness, even taking influence from the emerging doom metal genre, playing with confidence, playing with gusto, playing with evil in true Black Sabbath fashion. Don't get me wrong, I've enjoyed the last couple albums, but this is much more in line with what I love and appreciate about the iconic, true Black Sabbath sound. And as such, I've enjoyed the crap out of Dehumanizer. I mean, I honestly haven't listened to this in a very, very, very long time, and I was so excited to dig back into this after digging into all the other Tony Martin Black Sabbath albums. I would say that the latter half of this record is a lot stronger than the former half, especially lyrically. I'm just not really digging with the vibes and themes of Computer God and TV Crimes. But honestly, that latter half is so fucking good that I don't care. Like, Master of Insanity is a great number, Time Machine's a great number, Sins of the Father is a severely underrated Dio Sabbath cut. Production is great. Of course Dio's vocals are great. Of fucking course they are. I'd give this album a very enthusiastic 3.5 out of 5. It is a shame that this would end up being Dio's last official album with Sabbath, but at least it's a stronger note to go out on than The Mob Rules. Next up, Cross Purposes, released in January 1994. It's okay. Yeah, Tony Martin's back. He sounds great. Good for him. I don't really remember a lot of the material from this album at all. Like, seriously, nothing comes to mind at all. This is definitely one of the weaker albums of the Tony Martin era Black Sabbath. Like, there's just not really a lot to talk about. I mean, it's... I guess it's not horrible, but it's just not especially memorable or exciting. Definitely stick to Eternal Idol and Headless Cross. There's just not a lot going on here. I'd probably give this album a 2 out of 5, a very, very unenthusiastic one at that. And this brings us now to the band's 18th studio album, Forbidden, released in June 1995. Now, truthfully, I had never listened to this album until I decided to make this video. And also, truthfully, had I not decided to make this video, I probably would have never listened to it because a lot of people regard this as Black Sabbath's worst album. For me, that distinction still belongs to Born Again, but this definitely wins the silver medal at the Black Sabbath shit Olympics. I mean, it's not the worst, but it's not fucking good. It's got a very weird, grainy, primitive, lo-fi sound mix to it. There's influence from the blues, there's influence from power metal. Ice-T has some vocals across the record, which is really weird. There are a lot of different flavors and ideas and concepts on top of the pre-established Tony Martin Black Sabbath sound, and they're all clashing together, and not a lot of it makes a whole lot of sense, and it makes the album feel very awkward and incohesive. Yeah, I don't fucking like this at all. I don't even want to continue talking about it. 1 out of 5 from me. This thing's fucking terrible. And you know what? I'm kind of breaking my own rules here, but fuck it. If a Tony Iommi solo album can be considered Black Sabbath, then so can this. Let's talk briefly about The Devil You Know from Heaven and Hell, released April 2009. This would end up seeing the Heaven and Hell lineup of Black Sabbath, Dio, Geezer Butler, and Tony Iommi reuniting with Vinny Appice again on drums. For legal reasons, they obviously could not call themselves Black Sabbath, as by this point Black Sabbath was technically back with Ozzy and touring and playing festivals and all that kind of stuff, so they called themselves Heaven and Hell after the album of the same name, and they dropped this album, The Devil You Know. Musically, in some aspects, it is in line with Dehumanizer, but whereas Dehumanizer was simply pulling from doom metal, this is straight up fucking doom metal. This is catastrophically heavy. Some of the heaviest material these guys have put out in any project to date. It is slow, it is meticulous, it is a very patient record that in turn is often testing your patience, and by God is it dark. Like, holy shit is it dark. Even that album artwork, holy crap, look at that album artwork. That is so fucking dark. Double the Pain, Adam and Evil, Breaking into Heaven, Eating the Cannibals, and not to mention the incredible Bible Black. This is legitimately an amazing song, one of the best fucking songs Dio has ever sung, some of his best lyrics, his most emotive and powerful melodies and choruses. Worth noting as well, this was the last album Dio made while he was alive, and he just consistently brings it home across the album. Like, honestly, a career-defining performance for him in a career that literally has hundreds of career-defining performances. I would probably give this a 4 out of 5, honestly. I think this is a seriously great record. I would encourage you exercise a little bit more patience here than Dehumanizer or The Mob Rules, but if you stick with it, you're going to have a super enjoyable and truly evil Black Sabbath experience. And finally, that brings us to the end with 13, released in June 2013. The band's 19th studio album, their final studio album, in turn their first studio album with Ozzy Osbourne since Never Say Die. It was a pretty big moment for rock music at the time. I remember a lot of people were very excited for this album, myself included, even despite the legal drama surrounding the album and the band's somewhat uncomfortable relationship with Bill Ward, who unfortunately in the process was cut out of 13 entirely and replaced by Rage Against the Machine's Brad Wilk. Regardless of all that, this was still a monumental occasion, which is why it's all the more disappointing that this is such a mixed and uneven affair. I mean, there's definitely good stuff on here. For one, Geezer Butler, Tony Iommi, Brad Wilk all sound fucking fantastic together. Great riffs, great beefs, great bass lines, great melodies and ripping solos across the album. God Is Dead in particular is legit kind of a rager. I dig the crap out of that number. But unfortunately, the production value of the record does a lot to hurt this record, and I'm not just talking about Rick Rubin's incredibly overproduced and saturated sound. I'm also talking about Ozzy Osbourne's very overproduced, almost auto-tuned vocals. Like, let's all be honest with ourselves, Ozzy hasn't had any particularly great vocal performances since the No More Tears album, and even that album, his vocals were very obviously edited to hell and back. But the editing on 13 is especially egregious because he just doesn't sound like he's fucking there. Like, even on Ordinary Man, his most recent solo album, it sounds robotic, it sounds synthetic, but I can still kind of tell he's there. I can still tell there's genuine enthusiasm leaving his mouth, even if it's filtered through modern day buffoonery. But 13? Fuck no. I hear an android. I hear C-3PO trying to emulate Ozzy Osbourne. I don't hear Ozzy fucking Osbourne. Honestly, it's probably one of his worst vocal performances to date, and he consistently dogs down the album as a result. A genuine shame, honestly. I mean, they had all the elements in place to make this work, but unfortunately, Ozzy and Rick Rubin just sabotaged the fuck out of this goddamn thing. Unfortunately, I'd probably give this album a 2 out of 5. Definitely not the note I would want to end my career on, but hey, fuck it. You know, the album did well. It was nominated for Best Rock Album, so maybe that's a sign that I'm in the minority. Maybe this album has an actual following behind it, and if that's the case, good on y'all. And if not, well, at the very least, at least we still have Paranoid and Master of Reality. And that's it. This was annoying. This was difficult. This was very tiring. But it was also fun. Tell me about your favorite Black Sabbath album. Tell me about your least favorite Black Sabbath album. Tell me what else I should be doing on the Metal Meltdown. Should we review every Iron Maiden album? Should we review every Metallica album? Should we review every fucking, I don't know, Pig Destroyer album? Who knows? Maybe we'll do more. Maybe we won't. I don't know. Kind of depends on my mood at this point, but thank you for checking this out nonetheless. Press this button right here for updates on the Metal Meltdown immediately, and as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.